Good morning. Thank you all for joining us for today's coffee talk. My name is Sean O'Brien, and as always, I'm pleased to be joined by Steve Huntington. Steve, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Morning, everyone. Happy to have you all here for another Friday installation of our coffee talks. I'm Steve Huntington, Director of Analytics here at QwickRate. I've spent my entire career working with community banks all around the country, and been working with Sean here for about almost 12 years now.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Again, good morning to everybody. Just a reminder, a couple of housekeeping items. Certainly how to participate today. We'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A and take those either in the midst of the discussion or at the end of the presentation. We will send out a link to the recording and a copy of the slides probably on Monday afternoon or early Tuesday morning, so you can look for those, but we will share these with you. Again, just a reminder, trying to, again, just provide continual information, as we continue to administer CECL. Again, I think everybody's probably a lot more comfortable. I think the focus of these going forward, we'll kind of transition, right? We'll try to, again, provide you more peer data that we'll touch on a little bit today. We'll talk about, just kind of the evolution. I think in future ones, we'll talk about just, board reporting and, just kind of your internal administration, just to see if there's anything we can add or share from what other institutions are doing. But again, certainly appreciate you joining us this morning for another coffee talk. So as we've done recently, we'll continue with just a few polling questions today. So we got a question here. Steve, are you having any sound issues? We had a question coming in around sound
No,
issues.
your voice is loud and booming, but other than that,
Okay.
I can hear just fine.
Okay.
Maybe
All
too
right.
well.
All right. Thank you. Amber, I hope we can get that fixed for you. So we'll just start with a few polling questions. Whoops, let me pull this back up. I thought I had it. All right, first question. Is your June 30th ACL balance higher than your 12/31/23 balance? So again, I think just wanted to kind of get a sense as we approach, slightly past mid-year now, just kind of how views or perspectives may have changed about the outlook for your reserves. I know early in the year we saw, I think it's been pretty flat or about the same. So just kind of curious where everyone is residing. Okay, let me just give this a couple of more seconds. All right, share these results. So 51% of you are about the same, 40% are higher, and 9% lower. So thank you for sharing that. Let's move on to the next question, just regarding past due loans. Are you seeing any increase in past due loans? I know at our bank in Illinois, ours have certainly ticked up a little bit in the first half of the year. Nothing significant, but certainly you can see just a little bit of pressure. And I will say in our loan reviews, we've certainly seen repricing start to affect, some of the risk ratings and grades of some of the commercial loans. So, just some of the things we're seeing, and I think David will talk about a little bit more in a couple of weeks on our quarterly trends webinar. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this one. So 42% of you aren't, so that's great. 39% yes, and 19% about the same. All right, so let's move to the next one. Regarding loan balances, how does your loan portfolio balance compare to your 12/31/23 balance? Here again, I think coming into the year, I think there was a fair number of banks who were not turning off lending, but certainly were weren't pushing it. And I know from just the past couple of conferences, it feels like most institutions feel like they're willing to turn the spigot back on. So I'm just curious if that's resulting in any increase in loan demand across the space. And we'll go ahead and end that one. So 58% of you are seeing an increase or have seen an increase since last year, 13% lower and 29% about the same. So thank you again for those ones. And the last one, so I think the other thing I thought about this month for polling questions, and I think going forward too, just to make sure we're being sensitive to what you might be looking for from our coffee talks. This is one where you can just type in some answers, but we're really kind of looking, again, I think the administration of CECLSolver is really working well for all of you. But, again, if there's particular areas, I know we've gotten a lot of questions here recently just around, Q factors and, maybe support around those or justifying changes or documenting if you want to change, that. And so we just wanted to be sensitive to make sure if there's an area within your process, whether it's board reporting, whether it's, again, Q factor support, whether it's, treating individually assessed loans, just, anything that you'd potentially like to see us, focus on or bring someone in to talk about. I think, going forward, we'll probably have some of these, won't necessarily be polling questions, but just reaching out to make sure we're addressing any issues that all of you might be experiencing or just have concerns about or just would like more information on. So
Sean, you didn't tell me there was going to be fill in the blanks in this quiz. I was only anticipating multiple choice. I'm not prepared.
Yeah, nobody ever likes the pop quiz on Friday
No.
on the morning. But I think we spend a lot of time thinking about, again, just we've made some changes to, again, the tool a lot of times, just to try to, again, smooth it out or make it more seamless or frictionless. But, even within your own internal process, if there's something we can opine on or bring someone in to opine upon, we want to do that. So, yeah, it looks like there's a great number of responses, so we appreciate that. And, just be thinking about it for next month, because, again, we'll probably ask this question again in a couple of maybe other little bit more direct, kind of areas of where we may focus.
Yeah, and if we see some significant trends in those questions, we'll talk about some improvements that we anticipate making as a result of them, because that's how so
Yeah.
much of our tool has evolved.
Yeah.
Are from these types of responses that we continually get from our users.
Yeah, and I would say I think again, just the sense anecdotally from questions we've gotten that aren't related to say validation or things that we've commonly discussed. I feel a sense of a little bit of a building amount of questions, particularly about around changing your Q factors, making sure that the documentation is right, ways to substantiate or even enhance your current Q factor process. And so it just made me think, okay, the administration that all of you are conducting in your institutions, if there's things there that you have questions on, maybe we can be of assistance. So again, we're really in the process now of again making not only the tool better, but also again just helping with your administration if we can. So again, these are just some of the highlights that we've talked about, and we'll touch on a couple of them again here. Again, last month we talked about the enhancement to for those of you who are having your WARMs calculated by us. Some options that are available. Steve, I'll let you talk here going forward.
Yeah. So here we have, we mentioned this last month, we got a lot of, and this came directly from a lot of our users who wanted to kind of close the circle on inputs and having things automatically plugged in there whenever and however possible. So for our users that we're calculating WARMs for, now you'll notice whenever we calculate a WARM, if you go into run a new scenario, if you go to, why don't you go to the next slide so we can see a screenshot of it. There's a new green button, pre-populate button on the top of the WARM column, right in the loan portfolio summary. You click on that, you can choose a methodology. If you're familiar with our WARM estimator tool, we show a bunch of different ways one can calculate a WARM. There's a couple that are the most typical that the vast majority of our users utilize, and they are warms that are adjusted just for prepayments. So it's not taking into account amortization. It's giving you longer warms in general, and it's a more conservative approach versus adjusting for prepayments and amortization, which bring those warms down to a shorter duration, and all things being equal, typically a smaller historical loss rate, lower historical loss rate. Now, if you do not calculate our warms with us, this still the functionality still works, and it is still useful, because we have not only the regulatory study data, which shows segment level warms calculated for small financial institutions across the country that a third party statistical firm did for, actually they did it for the NCUA, but the data is still very relevant for a typical community bank, and so that can be some good guidance. And also, we're going to talk a little bit more today, again, about our user data averages. So we've been, as you know, we've had the tool out for a good while now, and in addition to making enhancements to it, we've been able to gather data from all of our the scenarios that are being built from all of our users. And at this point, we have, thousands and thousands of scenarios that have been run, and over 100,000 segment level data scenarios that have been run on the CECLSolver. And that's a great amount of data that can be used and applied, and for all of you guys, to give you some guidance on what your peers are doing for warms at the segment level, what direction Q factors are going in at the segment level, and ACL levels at the segment level as well, which is data that you just can't get out there in the marketplace, or in the public domain. And since we have so many users and so many scenarios now, we can start to slice and dice that data after we clean it up and share it back with you guys. And we've already started doing that if you've been to the last couple Coffee Talks, but we're enhancing the functionality there. So you'll be able to not just see, of all the thousands of scenarios run, what were the averages or medians. You'll be able to look at percentiles, like 25th percentile versus 75th percentile, and maybe even look at your region only instead of the whole country, or slice and dice by asset size. If you only want to look at, warms for smaller community banks or for larger community banks, all that function, some is there, and we're actively enhancing that. And I'm going to share some of that with you guys today. So again, even if you don't do our warms with us, you'll have those two peer-based options where you can pre-populate your warms and just see some industry data to compare your warms to see if you're on the right track with how you're calculating.
Yeah, and I think, again, I think that's Steve's done a great job, and we're really trying to do that. We'll do that even with our quarterly trends webinar, the QCBI webinars, but really, again, just trying to find as many ways to give context to what you're doing, potentially support for what you're doing, and again, just provide you with as much information as we can. So to that point, we do want to talk about some of the other resources that, again, may be helpful to you as you're thinking about support or just documentation you may want to share with a board or a third party, or even just internally as you're thinking about your reserve. So Steve?
Yeah, and I think I'll show these slides for just a second, and then I'll pull up my screen so we can be a little bit more dynamic with it. But we showed you guys some of the other interactive financial pages that we have on our site that are related specifically to reserves, right? We've gone and showed you the data that we collect from larger institutions that have to fill out the disaggregated loan loss reserve. As you know, that only comes in 6 buckets, right? For the over $1+ billion institutions that are filling out reserves by segment, there are 6 segments that the call report uses. They don't have all the segments from your loan portfolio from Schedule RCC. So we've shown you that page, but let's go ahead and let me share my screen now.
Yeah,
so we can share. All right, here we are. I think you can see that. Yep. So if I head to my bank, instead of going to CECLSolver, you can just head to my bank, and this is sort of the headquarters for all those interactive financial pages. Most of you are familiar with this. If I scroll down to the loan portfolio, click on loan portfolio, And again, this is available, unlike the CECLSolver, which is really just designed for you to use for your institution. All this data that we show you here on these other interactive pages is completely accessible for any bank or holding company, consolidated holding company in the country. So you can search for another institution and pull up all this data in addition to just your bank if you're curious about looking at any competitors. But if I head to the loan portfolio page, let's just go with the more detailed RCC segmentation. We have here just, your standard loan portfolio by bucket. And I can change periods, I can change durations, I can go back in time, I can look at years or quarters. Then I can scroll down here and I can see a loan composition. And then something we haven't shown quite as much is we also have maturity and repricing data. So you can see here for your portfolio or peers, how many dollars of loans and what percentage of your loans are maturing in less than 3 months, 3 to 12 months, 1 to 3 years. So this is great information for the ALCO committee when you're thinking about, matching repricing and thinking about where your loan portfolio is headed from a maturity standpoint. And by the way, you can click on any of these anywhere in the platform. On these interactive pages, you can click on a line item, and now I think I've mentioned this a couple times before. You get a definition of what that line item is and exactly how it's calculated from the call report. So that's kind of our new quote data dictionary, where we allow you to track and audit every single line item throughout the platform back to the call report and its original definitions. So that is kind of this is the way we look at the loan portfolio for CECL, right? But if you wanted to get peer data on reserves and you weren't using our proprietary data, which we'll talk about in a minute, you just want to get it from call reports, you can click on the ACL segmentation here. And what this means is we have these buckets, right? Construction, commercial real estate, and residential real estate are the 3 subcategories of real estate loans. And then there's commercial loans, which is mostly C&I, and consumer loans. And so those are the buckets that the call report uses for looking at disaggregated ACL data that exists for larger institutions. Here, we just see the loan composition and we see growth rates. If we want to see what that reserve information is, we go to the allowance for credit losses. This is a page that we have shown you guys in the past. If I click on it for a second, did I click on it? I didn't click on it. Now I did.
No, you did.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So here it's loading up. There we go.
And you'll note that it says incomplete reporting by banks. And part of that is because not every bank is required to complete this piece.
Right. And yeah, and the call report, the FDIC has been flippity floppity on whether they want everyone reporting this quarterly or semi-annually. And so there's been some bouncing around and inconsistency with the reporting for sure. But right here, you'll see those same buckets, right? These are these same buckets. And these are, if your bank actually fills this stuff out on, Schedule RIB Part 2, I think, maybe, then it'll be here. If your bank doesn't fill it out, then you'll still be able to see the peer data over time for your peer group and for a national average of all the institutions that report it over time. So if you're looking for that disaggregated reserve data, again, our data is probably going to be honestly better and more granular than this, but this is very comprehensive and includes the entire industry.
And again, I think, well, I just want to jump in, Stephen. Again, I think these,
Sure.
again, if nothing else, can just be supplemental to just directional, kind of sentiment of those larger institutions. And so,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah, so you can
just
see
another
here
piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, right. You can see here, let's say I wanted to compare my banks, or if I just want to see maybe all the banks that are big enough in my state to report this data versus the national average. I can choose that peer group and I can see the national average and I can track the reserve ACL trends on these buckets individually and compare different peer groups to national averages and then compare my own internal data, even if I'm not reporting it, right? Another page that I haven't shown you guys that I think is certainly credit related and can be is our concentration report. concentration report here is, well, relatively self-explanatory. But when it comes to concentrations, we have two different frameworks now, right? For all the institutions who are filing or CBLR, community bank leverage ratio framework institutions, we don't have a total risk-based capital calculation anymore. For those institutions that do, we do have a risk-based calculate. Now, when we're calculating things on a CBLR framework from a concentration standpoint, it's really not that much different. The way it works from a CBLR framework, it's tier one capital plus your loan loss reserve. From a total risk base, it's percent of total risk-based capital, but the vast majority of your risk-based capital is going to be tier one and loan loss reserve, right? I know there's a limitation. It's not perfect apples to apples, but it's pretty close. So if you toggle between these, you'll notice there's not too much of a difference in the calculations. But it shows all your loan segmentation. It shows it all as a percentage of your total, your risk-based capital. And it kind of tracks whether you're within those guidelines, right? The less than 300% CRE, less than 100% C&D, and then growth, less than 50%, 50% growth in a 3-year time period for CRE loans. So those three things the regulators look at carefully. And so it's something you certainly want to track over time. And you get a little summary up here. And then you have all your values over time, and you have a peer group, peer median, and then you have your percentile rank from 0 to 100 within the peer group. And again, just like anywhere else you are on the platform, you change the peer group, take 1 second, everything recalculates. If you want to look at years, you just click on annual, boom, we got 6 years now instead of 6 quarters. So it's very user-friendly and intuitive, very easy to pull it out, print it, export it with a single click to Excel or PDF. And always, as always, the charts up top are customizable. So if there's a particular segment you want to see or metric you want to see and get a nice visual chart, you can do that. John, was there anything else you wanted me to point out on here, or was there another type of concentration that you wanted to talk about briefly?
No, I think this is great because I think it leads into our next slide. I'll take back the screen, Steve.
Yeah.
And, I think, concentrations, we've certainly, are seen from our loan reviews and just comments from our banks, from exams, are certainly an area of focus. And I think what we, have been able to do with some of our banks is, again, depending on what their concentration is, and even if it's not over the guidance, what we are hearing is, discussion around what even within these concentrations, within the subsets of those, what does the portfolio look like? And I think that's one of the things that, our IntelliCredit tool has helped some of our banks who are using it, speak to very confidently, right? Because then they can speak specifically to not only the loans or the subsets of those concentrations, but then they can also speak to the, essentially the quality of that portfolio, right? That there's the ways to defend and show, the LTVs and just debt service coverage and other aspects of those portfolios that just gives a lot of confidence and really kind of steers the conversation away from any types of concerns. It also allows you potentially, if you have a large concentration, to have that further data to change your Q factors, right? We had a bank who demonstrated both to their board and to their regulator that despite being, heavily concentrated in a particular category, the loan quality was stellar, and they felt justified a decrease in the reserve apportionment for their Q factors. And so, I think I say this because ultimately, your best Q factors, can come from just the real, loan or the supporting metrics of your portfolio. Unfortunately, oftentimes we can't get at that data easily through our core systems. That's one of the really big values of IntelliCredit, is being able to quickly, to be able to get at that information very easily and be able to, transform it into tables and presentations that can be very supportive. All right.
Yeah, I mean,
so
taking the concentration concept to the next level, obviously, it's relatively simplistic just to be able to slice and dice your portfolio by the segments that we have available to us on the call report, right? And then there seems to be at first glance a heavy concentration in a particular segment, but then if you can zoom in on that segment and look at and show a diversity of different industries that loan type has been spread around within your local market, it's just a next level way to be able to assuage a regulator's fear or concern about one of their hit like touch list items, which is always concentrations, and that's something that's gonna be even more so, we think, going forward.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so then as Steve touched on at the top of the presentation, right? We started doing some work around just trying to build out some of the information that we're able to glean, from the users, and bring it back to you in a way that's helpful. And so he's continued to to work on this, and we are going to continue to work on this to make sure anything that we deem can be helpful or insightful or worthwhile. We're going to try to show it to you, and we're going to try to show it to you in as many varied ways as we can. Again, in the pursuit of trying to help you better understand your reserve, but also potentially defend it to your board or even to a regulator. So Steve, take it away.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of summarize where we're at so far with this database, because it's should be of significant value to you guys, and the more data that we get, the more value we can hand right back to you. As of today, or as of the end of June 30th, we had over 325 different unique community banks actively utilizing CECLSolver and creating scenarios in over 40 states. I think the number right now is 43 states. So Alaska, we're still coming for you. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're in 43 different states. Our community bank users, the institutions range from under 15 million in total assets. We have a de novo institution using it who's just starting to grow the bank, to over 4 billion in total assets, and averaging about $500 million in assets. Our CECLSolver banks have run over 3,500 scenarios at this point and created over 90,000 segment level data points for WARMs, Q factors, ACLs. So when I show you these charts and we continue adding to the functionality of these charts, I just wanted everyone to have an idea of the amount of the breadth and depth of the data that goes into them, because I think when you're looking at this type of data, it's extremely important to be confident that it's coming from a large segment of your peers, a large segment of the industry. If you've sliced and diced something so much that the sample size is 4, you're not going to get any usable data, especially at the segment level, right? Where losses don't come evenly throughout your portfolio. Institutions have losses here, they have losses there. So when you average out institutions over, you end up with lots of zeros and only little bits of data points where losses have actually occurred. So you need very large sample sizes to get good trends. And luckily at this point, we've been able to kind of aggregate all that. So when I'm showing you these segment level WARMs and the trends for the WARMs and Q factors and reserve levels, knowing that there's 90,000 plus data points behind each value that I'm showing you guys helps know that it's pretty solid. Let's go ahead and share some of that. Now, this is something I've shown before. This is now updated for second quarter. The nice thing about this data is we don't have to wait for call reports, right? On July 1st, I have a full set of all the scenarios that have been run from all of our users around the country during the second quarter. So we can start providing preliminary trends on second quarter WARMs, Q factors, and reserve levels before anyone has to file a call report. So for all of you who are using the CECLSolver to calculate your second quarter reserves before you have the benefit of seeing everyone else's second quarter call reports, right? Which is always a challenge, then this will be really helpful leading guidance, I think is the best way to determine. So for the second quarter, we've added that column here, and we still have a little trend lines, but you can scan through this and see what direction. I would say WARMs in general Most of those trend lines are headed down in the second quarter. So warms have gotten slightly shorter in the second quarter of the year. Q factors are for the most part going up. You see more green there than you see red. I think almost every segment had, except for almost every segment was either flat or slightly up when it comes to Q factors, which is obviously the leading reason for that would be concern about future credit quality that hasn't shown up in historical results yet, right? And then finally, reserve levels. Hadn't see anything significant. Reserves, total reserves, and these reserve levels here, as you can see from the header, these are reserves, the collectively assessed reserves, right? Where we're taking the majority of the pool, the vast majority of the pooled values, and calculating the historical loss rates, adding the Q factors, and coming up with ACL values collectively assessed. So the total reserves here at the bottom is for your collectively assessed portfolio. There's a separate area where we add in the individually assessed loans, right? A very different process for estimating losses for the collateral-based, problematic loans to get total reserve value. So if those are reserve values at the bottom, all the way in the bottom right there, look a little bit low, it's because they're for the collective pools. They don't yet include the individually assessed loans, which, by the way, are about 10 to 15%. We've seen about 10, maybe 10 to 20%. I would say more like 10 to 15% of total reserves coming from the individually assessed loans, and the other 85 to 90% in the typical collective pools. So that helps. But we're not seeing a huge directional trend in reserves at the segment level, but this data helps you see at the segment level where warms are higher, where Q factors are higher, and kind of directionally where they're headed. These are median values, all right? So the first additional benefit or additional complexity that we're adding in here that you guys should be able to utilize soon, I'm going to show it to you now, but you'll be able to use it in the next couple of weeks on the site, are percentile ranks. So if you head to the next screen, so right here is 25th percentile. So if you toggle back and forth a couple times, Sean, so look at these values for a second. Sorry, there's median values. Now go to the next screen. 25%, these are all a little bit lower. So you can get a feel for the range of Q factors, that your peers are seeing that are using the tool between, let's say, 25th and 75th. So focusing on being exactly where the peer group is not particularly helpful, in my opinion, when it comes to reserves, right? Your reserves are going to be the result of your specific experience historically, your relationship with your examiner, your business model, your growth trends. There's so much that goes into it that just comparing it to peers is obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it, but knowing where you are within a reasonable range, right? Between the 25th and 75th percentile, and getting some more comfort that your Q factors and reserve levels are within industry norms, so to speak, I think is incredibly helpful and comforting, and can lead to some flags where, hey, we're below the 25th percentile now in our reserves for our owner occupied. And we just talked about with the board, focusing on growing that portfolio or going into a market where there's a little bit more risk there. That kind of flags, hey, we need to look at this, how we're calculating reserve for this particular segment, and maybe be a little more conservative, or vice versa, right? You find you're above the 75th percentile for your Q factors or for your reserves for your mortgage portfolio. Does it need to be that high, or are you being too conservative in your economic estimate or in your Q factor adjustments, right? So these just lead to those types of conversations. So that's the 25th percentile. So these values are all going to be on the low side. And if you go to the next slide, 75th percentile, these are all going to be on the high side. So you see here at the 75th percentile, credit card loan reserves in the 3 to 4% range, total consumer loans, bordering on 2%. And the mortgage portfolio over, around 1.25 or a little bit higher. So certainly at the higher end of the range for at the 75th percentile, but you'll be able to, again, you can use this data right now. It's all accurate, but on our site, we have a page that shows this data. And in the next couple of weeks, you'll be able to toggle between 25th and 75th percentile to get kind of a range of where those are at. And you'll also be able to do some slicing and dicing, maybe by asset size. Since we have institutions as small as 15 million and as large as $4 billion using the tool, if you really feel that there's something something about your asset size that would lead to higher or lower reserves in general, then you'll be able to choose an asset range for all this data. I haven't seen huge differences in most of this data by asset size. There's not a really strong correlation. We're talking about a universe solely of community banks to begin with, but since we have such a large breadth and depth of users, we want to give you different ways to be able to sort and organize this data so we can be the most helpful. So more information on that to come as we keep working with it.
Yeah, and two things. One, we did have a question come in. Where will these charts be located? So it'll be in that knowledge base, Steve, if you want to just go there and show them again.
Yep, I will do that right now. Hold on, I'll go share my screen one more time so everyone can be clear, because we reorganized all that stuff when we added the comprehensive knowledge base page recently. So I want everyone to know where that's at.
Yeah.
All right. There we go. CECLSolver, big knowledge base button. Click on that. It's going to open up a new tab, which has all this stuff organized in it, and CECL peer normative data. So if I click on this, there we go. That's the exact same thing we were just looking at. It's just median data right now. It's just 1Q. Maybe on Monday, either next Monday or the following Monday, the 2Q data will be in here. It'll look exactly like what we have on the screenshot here. So if you get the copy of the presentation, you'll have that. And you'll have buttons here for 25th percentile, median, and 75th percentile. And in the future, you'll have more ways to slice and dice this. And this will be still on this page, but just with a lot more options going forward. John?
Yeah, and that's the hope, right? Is that we're just going to keep adding to this, but it can be found in that knowledge base area. So thank you, Steve, for sharing that. And again, going back to just the percentiles, I think it's not surprising, right, that if you're going to be more conservative with your warm, that you'll see higher warms, right, because you're going to be looking at a longer slice of time. So you can just kind of see the difference in the 1 to 4 family, a 4-year warm versus over a 9-year warm, right? That just one of the things that if you do want to be more conservative, extending that warm is also
everything's going to be higher, right? Your
exactly.
warms are higher. That means typically, of course, the look back periods are completely flexible now, but unless you're customizing everything, including all your look back periods, if you have a longer warm, you're probably using a longer look back period. You're capturing more losses historically. You're having to estimate losses over a longer period of time moving forward. Everything is kind of upped, right? And higher reserves you see as a result of that as well.
Yep. Another question came in regarding the warm, Steve. So if we calculate, the question is, if you calculate our warms, do we upload the file on the site or still just email them in? So I think there's two pieces to this question. You'll still send your data for us to calculate through the email, through the share file. Yep. Once we've calculated it, then we will upload it into CECLSolver for you. So you will not have to get an email back from us. We will load it.
Yeah. So you can, yeah, right. Once we're done with it, we'll do two things. We'll upload it and we'll send you the file. Yeah. So you don't have to send it back to us. Just know that if we're calculating your warms, once we send you the Excel file back, you'll also be able to go onto the CECLSolver that same day or the next day at the latest and see that same data by clicking on the pre-populate. So you don't have to type the data from the Excel file into the tool anymore. Still, obviously, you want to keep that. You want to save it. You may very well want to use our file upload to upload that warm file directly to your scenario, so that 6 months from now, if someone's questioning one of those things, you have all that data organized right within the tool.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Let me see if so the next question is, how is the warm data uploaded if we calculate our own? So right now that we don't have a
yours is not. Well, if you're calculating your own warm data, then you'd have to either send it to us to type in, or you just type it in. So it's not really saving anyone any, if you have to do the math, if you're doing it yourself, you're just plugging those values into the into the tool. But so they won't be available using the pre-populate button, but you'll still get the peer-based ones there if you're for reference, if you're interested.
Yeah, but we could potentially look at it if there's a way we can allow that upload to happen, maybe from them as well.
Well, the trick would just be, yeah, I mean, if you're calculating your own worms, you have your own, maybe you're using our template, maybe you're using your own, you'd have to send us an internal file, which we'd have to go and dig through, make sure we have the right values and type it all in. That's not, it's difficult to do that and remove risk. It kind of tends to add risk because you have people who aren't familiar with the calculations, typing them in and retyping them in. But
if they're using our template, there might be a way.
If they're using our template, yeah.
And Angela's question is they use our template. So
I'm
thinking there's probably something we can talk to the IT team about to see if there's a way we can make that happen too.
Yeah, because then everything's apples to apples.
Yes, exactly. All right. So next up, just thought we'd talk a little bit of industry credit trends again from the data that we have. Again, just trying to be thoughtful and share things that, again, even if it's just directionally, you can kind of get a sense of where things are going. So Steve,
these slides are similar to what we had last month. So I'm going to go through them a little bit quicker, but I know not all of you were here last month, and this is still also March 31st data. This will all be updated with all these types of analyses will be updated for second quarter next week. With unfunded commitments, we like to point out when people are more and more institutions are finally realizing that, or finally deciding that they have to put something, or they feel like the need to put something in the unfunded commitment reserve on the liability side of the balance sheet. Most institutions had not done this in the past, even though it's always been on the call report. And still about half the institutions in the country are reporting zero unfunded commitment ACL, despite having some level of unfunded commitments. But it skews, what it does is it skews the data, right? If you want to see what the ACL values are for your peers, reserve values for your peers for unfunded commitments, and you just take a median of all the ACL percentage to total unfunded commitments across the board, you're going to get close to zero. And that's because half the values in there are zero. If I remove the guys, everyone who's not filling in something, and we only report institutions that are calculating some sort of reserve for the unfunded commitments, we get much more reasonable data points as to, hey, what levels of reserves are people plugging in for unfunded commitments when they're plugging something in, right? And it's like about 30 basis points of reserve. So it's about a quarter of the reserve levels that you have for your typical funded portfolio. And most of the difference there is because there's only the probability of funding is in that 20 to 30% range, right?
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's telling, and we touched on this last quarter, right? Or last month. I'm with most of you who probably have zero in there, because it's just probably an immaterial, A, risk, and B, probably an immaterial amount of lines that you might have. But nevertheless, as you can see, even over the last 12 months, the number of percentages reporting zero has gone down, and I don't think there's any question that is a direct result of this is something regulators are asking about. Why is it zero?
They're taking a fresh look at it now, right? Yeah. It was there before, but now it, as a part of CECL, it's kind of come along for the ride with CECL, and now it's being focused on more frequently.
Yeah, and zero still may be the appropriate answer, but I think you just have to know if you have zero, you'll probably be asked about it and be able, asked to defend why it's zero. Yeah. And so I think you've seen banks just throw something in there to make that conversation go away, or just be easier. But nevertheless, I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing that number go down, and probably will continue to see it go down.
So interesting that also suggests that if you just look at the median, that second row there, you would say, it looks like people are increasing their reserves for unfunded commitments. No, they're not. They're keeping the same level of reserves for unfunded commitments, just more of them are reporting it now, right? The median for those people who are filling it out has been 30 basis points for the last year. So even though the total median has gone from 0 to 8, it's all because of more are adopting it, but adopting it at the same level over time. So interesting.
That's right. Yeah. So again, as Steve touched
Yeah.
on, yeah, we're going to try to, carve this up into regions. Steve, take it away.
Yeah, well, this is we did this last month, and I'm going to try to integrate this into our proprietary data. This is for reserve levels, total reserve, right, on the whole loan portfolio for all community banks. Being able to look at this at the segment level and look at it geographically in different regions is going to be awesome, and we'll be able to provide that for you guys. But for now, I just was kind of curious. This came out of my own curiosity as to what kind of regional differences are we seeing right now in reserve levels. Reserves being highest in the West and lowest in the Northeast, and with a national average of still about 1.25. So after all this hoopla, Sean,
Yeah,
we're still talking about 1.25.
1.25. That is the safe zone.
Yeah.
That is the safe zone.
Or maybe a little bit less if you're in the north.
In the Northeast.
Yeah, I mean that was shockingly different than the rest of the country on average, actually.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing you'll note is one of the reasons we wanted to carve it up in this particular map is this is the map that we have used in our quarterly trends rep webinar with David Ruffin. So we did want to make sure we were going apples to apples. So this will be consistent with what we show or have shown in that presentation. All right, Steve.
Yep, this is all coming from not from our proprietary data, but from UBPR Peer Group 5. Just trying to get a feel for what direction outside of the feel we're getting from all of our users, just looking at all the call report data, what direction is credit quality been going in? So we go as far upstream as possible in the call report, meaning the first spot in a call report where credit deterioration is is apparent is in 30 to 89 days. So we look at that trend, and we see some increases, maybe not at so much at the medians, but somewhat at the 75th percentiles. If we look at construction and land development, right, 75th percentile past dues has gone from negligible and kind of just bumped up in the first quarter. And total 1 to 4 family residential bumped up at the end of last year and has kind of flattened out a little bit. So, but you see in general some increasing patterns of past due loans for typical community banks. And again, UEPR Peer Group 5, as we know, is a quarter of the industry.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Yep.
Same thing we did here for non-accrual. So as credit issues are starting to work their way, through the cycle, after past due, we get to non-accrual, and we kind of targeted and saw where we're seeing the most significant or consistent increase. And non-farm, non-residential bumped up significantly in Q1, and C&I as well.
Yep.
Next slide.
Did my charge-off slide come up?
Oh, sorry. No, it did. It did. I didn't see it. And then obviously the last place we see it is in gross. This is gross charge-offs. We don't want to get mixed up right now with recoveries that are lagging. Right now, we're looking for leading indicators of where credit trends are going. So we don't want to kind of muddy the waters with a lagging recovery type trend. So we look at gross charge-offs to see where those trends are headed. The one tricky thing with gross charge-offs is there is a very seasonal element to it, right? Where they definitely are higher at the end of a year than they are at the beginning of a year. And so the best way I've found as an analyst to really track is to look at the most recent quarter versus the same quarter a year earlier. And so you can see right here in C&I and consumer loans, at the higher percentiles, right, at the 75th or 90th percentiles of charge-offs, there's a significant increase in the first quarter of this year versus the first quarter of last year.
Okay, so a couple of questions came in, Steve. Is there a way in CECLSolver to modify the WARM if you calculate it for us? We make adjustments for our bank's actual prepayment estimates.
If we're calculating your WARMs and we send you that Excel file, and up until this point, you've plugged in the numbers. Now, if you click on the auto populate, it'll auto populate your numbers, but then they'll still be overridable. So it'll auto populate the values that we sent you in the Excel file. And if you want to change one of them, you just go into your scenario after you auto populate and you type over whichever one you want to change. And if you want to make a note of that, I would heavily heavily use the note function, meaning that column all the way on the right that says notes. So you can type in and say, we overrode the warm for this particular segment, so it doesn't match the, the study that we had QwickAnalytics do for us, something like that.
And then question, I don't know if it's a comment or questions, just talking about the ACL of 103 versus the UBPR of 124. I'm not sure exactly which the two slides that if we go back.
Sorry, UBPR. Oh, so that's what I was talking about between the CECLSolver peer data ACL of 1.03%. That's the collectively assessed, right? First of all, that's for our few hundred users and not for the UBPR peer group. But when you have a sample size of 300 plus, it should still very closely approximate a sample size of 1,000, which is the UBPR. So I wouldn't expect that much of a discrepancy between our internal stuff and the UBPR if it were apples to apples. But it's not apples to apples because that slide from our internal stuff is the collectively assessed portion. Also, remember I said the individually assessed is about 10 to 15%. So if you take our 1.03 and add 15% to it, what are you going to get? About 1.2, which is right about where the UBPR is. So the difference is because of the individually assessed. We're going to add to our CECLSolver user data, not just the collectively stuff we have now, but also summary data, which just shows total ACL levels that are calculated using the tool, which will include the individually assessed. So it will be a perfectly apples to apples comparison.
Yes.
And you'll get it a month quicker than the UBPR.
Yeah. And so again, just a reminder, the CECLSolver knowledge base, is where we're going to, house or warehouse this. So again, it's that big blue button up in the top left of the CECLSolver page. But, as we touched on, we've got highlighted here, some of the more popular things that folks are looking for. The peer data medians you can see in the middle column at the bottom highlighted is where this norm data will be. Again, we're working on additional video resources to, address and, common questions we got, but also if there's best practices to highlight as well. Steve, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, we just last month we added the tool updates and enhancements. So that was some users were, in going through an audit or going through a validation, they wanted to see a list of changes to the model, so to speak, over time, changes to the tool. So this is sort of we wanted to put it in black and white there. And there's a list of the significant enhancements to the tool, just with the footnote, and it mentions that on the file as well, that we have never changed the core functionality of the tool. The methodology that we use and the math that we use for the core functionality of the CECLSolver is and always has been the same. So when it comes to when your auditing firm or someone is asking for significant changes to the model or to the math, we haven't had any. We've had enhancements where we've had things where you can tweak things if you want to, but the way the steps are calculated mathematically and everything else has always been consistent.
Yeah, it's never changed. Yeah,
right.
Good distinction.
And we just uploaded our new updated SOC. So the SOC report was just updated. We finished that process again, which we do every year. But there's a new one up there.
Yep, up in the audit function there. Yep. Okay, so again, here's just a reminder. This is where the knowledge base is located on the CECLSolver page. As Steve said, we'll have soon to have the video resource button library. There'll be a button for it as well. We certainly, in our recent survey, had a number of wonderful quotes and comments from you, our customers. So we certainly appreciate all of you who participated in that survey and gave feedback. We certainly appreciate it. Again, are really striving to continue to make this a good tool even better. And so I certainly appreciated all the kind words that we received in those surveys. Just a final kind of ask if there's any questions anybody has today. Steve, anything else you want to touch on before we let everybody have their Friday?
No, I was trying to sneakily hint as towards something I'm trying to plan to do this weekend a little bit. But
all right, that's good. Just a reminder, we do have, we touched on IntelliCredit. We did the loan data webinar or coffee talk a week or so ago. Just again, if you want to take advantage of our free trial, again, see how this might be able to aid and assist not only your overall loan administration, but just even particularly for CECL. The reason for the 6-month trial is we want to help, demonstrate the value of the product. We will build reports for you. We will help you build them. We'll build them ourselves for you, so you don't have to. Again, just want you to be able to get at your information in a way that we think can be really helpful across many facets of your institution. So, certainly reach out to us and take us up on that 6-month free trial. Next month, we'll be back for a coffee talk with the quarterly numbers being updated. We thought we'd have David on as well, just to talk about, again, what they're seeing in loan reviews and just general credit trends. And so certainly encourage you to register for that one. Just check here. We got another question come in. Is there any guidance on values for environmental conditions in the Q factors? So, again, just the Steve has in one of the slides we just had, the different breakdowns. We haven't gone to that extra step of saying specifically a particular factor has done, but I think we are trying to introduce and bring just some economic data going forward that you'll be able to access as well. But I do think, we are going to try to spend more time on Q factors, what banks are doing, what they're seeing, what they're changing, why they're changing. So we can certainly try to talk about that.
Yeah, I would say there isn't any coming from the regulators. There isn't any particular guidance that other than the economic projections that come out and how you want to factor those into what impact you think that they will have on your local market conditions. But as far as how we take that data and how we can present it to you in a more useful way to allow you to make those subjective decisions and defend them, we're working, as Sean mentioned, we're working on some significant enhancements to the economic and demographic information that we have on the platform. We've shown you guys the industry trends page where you can choose a bunch of economic trends and overlay them over your and your peers' historical asset quality trends. That's a great place to start to see correlation between unemployment in your state and when you've had increases in past dues or even charge-offs. But we're trying to take more economic trends and integrate them a little deeper into the tool in general, specifically focusing on some of those economic trends that the regulators focus on, right? They haven't mentioned too many exact time series from a CECL standpoint, but they have mentioned a bunch of specific time series from a stress testing standpoint. If you look at the regulatory guidance for the larger institutions, the DFAST institutions on stress testing, the Fed puts out a publication once a year, and they list a handful of specific economic growth indicators that they think are some of the most important ones to take into account when stressing your credit portfolio. That's gonna translate to CECL pretty directly, right? And so we're focusing on some ways we can present those trends to you in a helpful way to help you get a feel for that element, for the environmental external qualitative factors.
So a question came in, where is the validation of historical loss rates again? And the validation. So again, you can see on the CECLSolver knowledge base, which again can be found by clicking on this blue button on the CECLSolver page, and then up here in the audit functions, right? We've got some support. We have our SOC 1. We've got an example of how the loss rate's calculated as well. Steve, anything you want to add there?
Well, yeah, the first link there is a discussion that we've typed up with explaining what our role is in the validation process and what we can do and what we can't or are not allowed to do for you guys. Second one's a SOC 1. Third one is example data. It just shows how a lifetime historical loss rate is calculated from data, not your data. The last one, the historical loss data calcs and audit tool, that is the one that's a functional. If you have access, if you use our Excel add-in tool, you can pull all of your historical data directly into that Excel file, and it's a perfect, complete auditing of all the historical loss rates from a particular scenario that you have. If that's something that you need help with, reach out and we'll help with it. But that's where it lives.
Great. Okay, let's see. I don't see any
Look at that.
additional
10:59 and 58 seconds is when we
That's
stopped,
right.
John.
Hey, that's
Woo.
better than we've been. Well, we
Solid.
appreciate everybody's time today. Hope you have a great weekend. Let's see, there's one more comment came in. Question about any comment about the sale. So yeah, I think you know, for those of you who saw the announcement, you know, QwickRate has joined forces with a company called Infusion Marketing. You know, I think for us, it's business as usual. You know, Infusion, you know, focuses a lot of their efforts on assisting institutions with raising local deposits. So we think it's a perfect adjacent business to what we do. They also have a lot of insights around deposits. So we're hoping, you know, one of the things that the combination will bring together is obviously an additional service that everybody could, you know, potentially access. But we hope it'll bring more data that we can bring both in the IntelliCredit side to the analyzer and have deposit data, but also insights that we can incorporate into QwickAnalytics. So I think, you know, again, for today, there's really no change because, again, they do something different than we do, but it's an adjacent business. But we do think that, you know, one of our exciting, you know, ideas is that we can bring more data alive in QwickAnalytics and the analyzer.
Yeah, as you guys know, I'm a data guy. It's no surprise at this point. And the data they have that we can work with now, that we can present and provide you with some more tools from our toolbox. But as far as what we do and who here is doing it, no change whatsoever.
No change.
Exactly all the same people. Yep.
Yeah. So, so Nate, thanks for the question. Certainly, thanks for your comments as well. So appreciate it again. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and we will catch you all again next month. And then look for our quarterly trends webinar. It'll be coming up in August as well. But Steve, any final things before we let him go?
No, that's it.
All right.
That's it for
All right.
me.
Well, good luck fishing this week, Steve. Thanks, everybody.
Don't give me that, Sean. No, don't say that. That's a kiss of death. I'm not going to have good luck fishing, but hopefully it won't be raining and I'll enjoy myself.
There you go. All right. Thanks, everyone.